Hi colleagues, and welcome to our next episode of DINCast, where today we're going to be looking at how you reboot your business for purpose. And I'm delighted to be joined in this discussion by Karen Lynch, former CEO of Blue Water, a social enterprise which Karen stepped in and transformed into an environmentally and ethically sourced business, which gave all of its profits to charity WaterAid. She's also a non-executive member of Homes for Good and the vice chair of Social Enterprise UK. So, Karen, I think we'll just rewind back to sort of the you starting at Blue, because I think it would be good to sort of refer back to the past as a place of reference, and how what you started there, because you went into a crisis situation at Blue, what lessons you can now sort of deploy in the current crisis that we've got. So could you just sort of explain a little bit about sort of, from the time that you came across Blue and then decided to take the leap into the water?
Yeah, and I think just for context, so my background was 13 years in media and then 6 years in banking, in working for Barclays, looking after 3,000 branches of Barclays in Woolwich, everything around messaging and comms, and I left that because I was looking for purpose and wasn't sure how I was going to find it, so consulted and moved around a bit for a year and came across Blue and its problem completely by accident. So I was engaged to look at the problem of, we've got this debt, we've got this brand Blue, but we don't want to put any more money in, it's not working. Can we sell the brand and recoup some of the debt? So it was £1.9 million worth of debt on a very small social enterprise. And my background being mostly in brand, and I should, full declaration at this point, fell off my horse, broke my leg, had a few drugs, so maybe it was even a bit more ballsy than I would normally have been, when nobody's going to buy this brand, because whilst it's been disruptive, it's in a negative space, so it's alienating everybody. But here's what you could do, and I wrote a business plan. So way beyond the brief, which was, here's what it's worth, nothing. I wrote a business plan. And I accidentally became the chief exec, which was a really tough period because there was a chief exec in place already who had to move on, accepting that, the 5 years that he'd been trying to get this business model off the ground and wasn't working. The situation was getting worse. So I started with what's the idea, what we're trying to achieve, and is that still relevant? And I think the idea of disruption is always relevant. It's got to be, but how do you make disruption positive? Because if you tell people they're bad, they move away, right? You need to disrupt in a way that brings positive energy so people engage and they want to be part of better. And you need to get to a place where people on Zoom or around the table with what I call nodding heads, and, those dogs in the back of the cars, when everybody's in agreement, because then why not? And then accepting there's only us will make the change. So what's really simple for me is if the idea of setting an environmental benchmark in an industry as bad as the bottled water industry will help the whole industry improve, then it's worth doing. So the idea was still valid. The bit that was missing was, how do you do this in a way that is sustainable? Well, you've either got to have a huge pot of money, so you have charitable funds of people who want to buy the change and believe it's feasible. I think with Blue had proven it wasn't. Or there is a way through doing it differently. So the disruption was to prove you could trade successfully by A, being environmentally the best, and B, by producing a surplus, by being profitable, but then that surplus being reinvested in ending water poverty. And the idea was that the end goal of being successful, making profits and ending water poverty, becomes the brand story, because at that point 10 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about carbon emissions and carbon footprinting or plastics. Blue arguably was just a decade before its time because nobody wanted to listen to doing it differently. But being before its time, I think is really interesting now. Everybody now talks about plastics, thinks they're bad, but maybe even if they don't know, has an inkling that bioplastics or compostables are better, right? They're good. They're not, they're worse. Compostable materials like paper and card can be better and often a bigger footprint, but actually bioplastics just break into little pieces and go into the environment. It hadn't addressed the issue about human behavior and recyclability. So I do a presentation on this. It started off being what we changed about Blue to make it work. We since changed it into what we didn't change. and it's a very short presentation.
Brilliant. Well, maybe we'll come back and sort of revisit that one then, Karen. So you dropped into Blue at that particular point in time. What were the key personal skills that you sort of drew upon in terms of, you came into that organization? Clearly, as you say, taking the people with you was going to be, but you came from a totally different sector. So what were the skills that you drew upon that enabled you to successfully make that transition?
So I think there's probably two broad parts of my career, which the first part of my career when I worked in magazines, my teams were people who were mad keen on fishing because they worked on Track Fishing magazine, or horses, they were on Your Horse magazine. So the bit I'd grown up, in business, I ran, each magazine at EMAT was run as a separate P&L. It had to work or it didn't survive. But I knew what it was like to be engaging people through their passion and about trying to relay that passion to others, to audiences, to magazine readers, to enable movements of fishermen or cyclists or bird watchers to grow. So, and I was, applying that to a different way of doing business. So movement building was exactly the same. And if you think about my product in a crowded marketplace where, people can turn on the taps, people can buy any number of mineral water brands, is how do we make ours stand out? How do you build that emotional connection? And so it was about working through that business model of how do I ignore the statistics and do the right thing? So if I had that point looked at the bottled water market, you'd have gone 70% of sales are in 500ml plastic format and the majority is sold through grocery. So if I want to be successful, I should produce 500ml bottles and I should sell through grocery. And I see a lot of businesses do that. They're driven by data and they logically go, biggest sector, here's what I'm going to go. You usually will find that that's the most competitive and toughest sector, therefore. So for me, it was about saying, here's what the market looks like, where's our niche where we're going to play, and then how do we build that emotional connection? And that led to me down a very obvious path. If I get Raymond Blanc on side, then everyone who passes through his restaurant is going to be consuming Blue. If I get Jamie Oliver on side and everyone who goes to a Jamie's Italian, and likewise Cafe Rouge, Strada, Pizza Hut. So it was about clarity of market sector, and it was about clarity of, whilst everybody would view Blue as a consumer brand, we're a B2B model because it's about developing routes to market. It's not about creating consumer pull because that costs too much money, takes too long.
And looking back now on your very successful time there now, is there anything you think, gosh, if I'd done that differently, or if you could go back and sort of change a decision or a view? Because I'm interested in terms of, your decision-making process and things like that. Is there anything you would have done differently?
So right now in our COVID world, absolutely. So, Blue's real strength was it understood end to end everything about hotels, restaurants, corporate catering. We obsessed over building relationships there, creating products and services, including filtration systems and reusable bottles. I mean, it was all around. If you need water in that sector, we're the people to work with. You'll get the lowest carbon footprint, and every penny we make is transforming lives. It gives you a marketing story. Now, what that means is right now, it was never on our risk log that the whole country would be in lockdown and the hospitality industry would be on its, be closed. Had we also had a retail strategy in place where we were proactively selling plastic product, then the business would be finding it much easier to get through the COVID period now, because you'd be selling huge volumes of plastic bottles of water through Sainsbury's, because despite what people are saying, there's a huge market for that. But so it would be easier, but actually when you think about your values and your ethics as an organization, our business is moving away from single use. We're trying to move restaurants and hotels into filtration systems and reusable bottles. So had we been doing that, we'd have been chasing the pounds, not the impact that we're trying to create. So it will be easier to get through. And I think there is a business case that says sometimes you do things that you would rather not be doing, but because it's a key part of the long-term sustainability of your business.
And that's a really, really important point. As I say, for a successful social entrepreneur like yourself, that profit with a purpose you can sometimes get conflicted because, you know, you've got to keep the business going?
Do you know, and I like to think of it not as conflicted. I like to think of it as purist versus balanced. So if you visualize a seesaw, and the kind of is it the fulcrum? Remember on science lessons, the triangle bit in the middle and the bit on the top is, and I think this applies to people as well. You know, when we're hiring, some people are all about them, and it tips the seesaw that way, and some people are purely about, you know, I won't stop giving until I've given my last kidney. You know, and actually what you want is, you want people who are balanced. You want realists. You want maybe a slight tip towards purpose and mission, that they'll give a bit more than your average, you know, but, you know, there's no point being completely purist, because you will take that business to the point where it's not sustainable. There needs to be an element of balance.
And so during the crisis, I know you've followed it with interest. Has any of your assumptions or beliefs about the way that the businesses do business sort of changed? You know, because obviously out of this crisis there are going to be opportunities.
I think I've probably learned more about human behaviour than businesses, because I think businesses behave logically. They want to survive. You know, if they're in survival mode, they want to make more money if they're making money. And, you know, and I've got some in my friends network, you know, I've got, you know, a couple where one of them is raking it in and one of them is having one of those traumatic time ever. So imagine living in that house. You know, even myself, you know, if the only flour you can get, you know, is X brand, then your brand loyalty disappears. If you can't get yeast, you start making sourdough. People get more creative. So I think human behaviour is, and there's lots of interesting reading about what type of COVID responder are you out there. So I think human behaviour is interesting. And some people might not notice it. I'm hating it. I'm hating that I'm overpaying for some stuff. I hate it that people are profiteering. I'm therefore going without in things that I thought I might never go without. I'm paying more for some things and switching up in terms of brands, because actually I'm learning that that's better value. They might break through a price barrier with me, but it is actually going to last longer. I've got a great refillable zero waste deodorant from a business called Proverb that would always been above my price point for a deodorant, but I've tried it and I'll never go back, for example. So human behaviour is changing. I think businesses in the back to the digital space that I've touched on briefly with you before, is realizing all of those things we've not quite got to that we wish we had, that would have made it easier. I think a lot of businesses aren't as disciplined as they should be in making sure there's always some kind of new product development or new proposition development or operational improvement going on. I mean, in my blue years, I was renowned for, you know, every third year we'd take the foot off product development and growth and focus on operational improvement because of my obsession around removing waste and reducing footprint. So we would go in cycles, and I'm not sure, you know, if all organizations did that properly, you would never get through the cycle of redundancies, because you preempt those and see that happening. Because you know, an operational review should have a focus and then a 3-year plan until the next one. So
that's really interesting. I've not heard of that approach before, but actually that's quite a preemptive model, and forces you to look at the business more.
And again, I think that comes from the small business thing, right? So if you employ 10 people, it's personal. You're responsible for their mortgages, for their rent, you know, and I never, ever wanted to make, you know, people redundant. And I come from a banking world where an organizational restructure was every 6 months, you know, and that unnerving, I hate that unnerving of going into consultation, you know, with far more people than are actually affected. It's just one of the most negative experiences that I've ever experienced or experienced with my teams, and I never wanted to have to do that. So that for me was that personal connection of always making sure I was thinking about the business well beyond where it is, linking back to that human piece.
So you're now in a new role with Social Enterprise UK. So you're helping social enterprises grow. Where do you see, you know, the members within the SE UK, where do you see such businesses in a post-COVID world? Do you see the outlook as being promising with some opportunities, or do you think that actually some just ain't going to make it?
Huge mixed bag, right? So the bit we've got to remember about social enterprises is they're all connected, and that they're driven by something more than making money. Environment, social impact, inclusivity, education, you know, we're all connected. We all feel the same. But yet, you know, you can't compare a socks company and a chutney company with a a soap company, with a dental service, with a, you know, elderly care service. It's just so different. And what you find when you speak to people in these situations is they're affected differently. Some are inundated for their service, but still don't have the resources they need to deliver at better and greater volume. Some have lost all trade and are pivoting. Some are collaborating. You know, some are mothballing. It is affecting them differently. And I think, like all businesses, not just social enterprises, there is a tell about how well they've been run, managed, and have their risk logs and plan for success. I mean, my big business background meant our risk log at Blue was way more detailed and bigger than it needed to be, but it still didn't have a pandemic on it, for crying out loud, you know. So they are responding in exactly the way you would expect: more innovative, more collaborative, wanting to find purpose within it, doing what they can. Some of them will come through this having learned lots and have already pivoted their business by responding. They'll have found a new place in the world. Some of it will have learned lots about how to operate more leanly, if that even is possible in social enterprise space, because they've had to get through, and they will get right back at it. But maybe, as I said, they might think about different markets or diversification. Some, I think, we will lose to be reborn, because it makes more sense to stop what they were doing and start again. And sometimes that's the hardest message to take or to give, that, you know, you could try and trade through the next 6 to 12 months, but at which point your debt position might have increased significantly, and that's more costly than stopping and starting again. You know, there's nothing wrong with an induced coma and starting again, as long as it doesn't go back to what it was doing before, and that's become outdated.
Mm. Now, I know you're sort of a big fan of SUK sort of buy social, and it's been relatively successful. But could you just explain a little bit more how that might work, and whether, you know, you think there are opportunities in there for, say, my members in the social housing space to actually buy more socially?
Absolutely. So buy social is it's a way of, in 2 words, summing up, I guess, what the Social Value Act said, which is, instead of thinking about the price of what you buy and the product, the gadget, the service, actually look at what you're investing through that spend, whether it's of public purse or private business monies, what you're actually getting for it in terms of value. So that bigger picture. And it can be a tough one, particularly going through or coming out of tough times. You know, people might want to go for cheapest, but, you know, we know instinctively as individuals, cheapest is rarely best. There's usually a reason for it. You know, if it's too good to be true, it's usually because it is. So buy social is simply about saying, when you're choosing to buy socks or deodorant or cleaning services or decorating services or building services or furniture, or, you know, there's a social enterprise in almost every walk of life. There is a choice to do something more than just get the thing that you want. You can have a positive impact on society and or the planet, or both. Now, there's a consumer facing campaign we run each year where we try to raise awareness. It's movement building, right? And we need more people to get what buying social is. And then the Buy Social Corporate Challenge is where we're getting bigger businesses to basically join in with Social Enterprise UK as supporting partners. So people like Waits, I'm sure your members might have heard of, or Johnson & Johnson or Nationwide, where actually we work with them to say, let's look at everything that you buy, that everything you spend money on, from stationery to cleaning services to decorating. How could we help you buy those things from a social enterprise, where not only can you report the works completed or the purchase made, but also the positive change made in the world as a result? And that's a very easy, yes, I'd like to be a partner, please. We welcome you on board, and then the resources at Social Enterprise UK work with your procurement teams to analyse the spend and the supply chain and help you bring social enterprises into your supply chain.
Yeah, it's certainly something, you know, it would be great to see more businesses be aware of and actually buy through it as well. But final question then, in terms of drawing on your own personal experience and career, in the current times that we live, what one piece of advice or guidance or you know, piece of knowledge would you sort of want to share with leaders?
Are you really going to limit me to one? I've got like a list of 5 or 6.
You go with 5 or 6, and we'll choose the best ones, Karen.
I guess number 1, I would say, forget objectives. Right? Not forever, but first, focus on outcomes. We don't spend enough time really clarifying as a team what outcomes we're trying to create, what dials we're trying to move, what does success look like, and then work back over to what the objectives are and then who does what. Because all too often we leave meetings, we keep doing the same things, and we're surprised that we always get the same results. So outcomes beat objectives to me as the focus, hands down. The second one would be do less and do it better. Again, going back to this routine, this habit of if I'm busy, I don't need to feel any guilt. And then we'll add it up at the end. You know, start every day focusing on where you need to get to by the end of this year, how that aligns with your mission vision, and therefore what today and this month means. But do less and do it better is about, as a business, being really clear what your priorities are. So at Blue, we had a customer plan. So, you know, and you don't really want more than 10 things across the whole business, you know, about what are we trying to do for our customers or our key stakeholders. And then we'd have an operational plan, you know, what do we need to do to keep this business running and improve the running of it. You know, 20 things across the whole organization is stacks, you know, to report and measure against. You know, if you're a small business, you maybe want 6, you know, maximum. Thirdly, never spend money, only invest it. So because of that, you will do at the beginning what people forget to do at the end, which is measure what's worked. You know, if you invest it, that means even if it's a very brief one, you have a business case about this is what I'm going to spend money on, this is why, this is what's going to happen, and this is what the return's going to be. And in Baloo, it was a really focused way of doing it, because we would say £15 of profit transforms a life long term through access to clean water. So if we spend 15 quid, we're going backwards. How do we make that £15 we're about to spend pay back more than the 15? So always about forward momentum. And because of that, next point is test and learn, right? Find little areas of the business where you can break the rules. So don't spend months and years perfecting things to the point of internally think it's perfect, then you launch it and then people go, but you didn't think about that. Collaborate with customers, collaborate with beneficiaries, test things, learn from them, and then gradually grow them, because you will find you're further ahead than ever you would be if you try and perfect something and then launch it. And I think we'll see a lot of that going through COVID, people trying things and building more confidence to test and learn. Next biggie is about collaborating, right? If you sit like this and keep your business secret and your numbers, you know, are yours, and you go into meetings and you don't make that emotional and honest and transparent connection, you'll never find the right people to work with. And as the saying goes, if you want to go far, go together. You know, find people you can work with, but then be really clear and transparent about what's being trying to be achieved, and roles and responsibilities and timeframes. And then finally, I would say hire to values and then play to strengths for 80% of the time. 20% of the time, let your people learn new things. And I guess you could look at that as another way is, you know, 80% of business is common sense, 20% of it is madness, you know, because common sense all of the time doesn't give you progress in innovation and challenge. And then I think I would kind of close by just saying, at a personal level, as we go through COVID, there's probably never been a better time to look back at yourself and figure out, are you in the right job? Are you in the right organisation? Is it giving you enough purpose? Because life's too bloody short to be doing something that you wish you weren't doing. And as much as Barclays was a great employer, I looked around me and I just struggled with the amount of waste I saw in infrastructure. I struggled that I wasn't feeling the personal purpose. I just couldn't find it within that organisation. There's purpose to be had, but I couldn't. And therefore my time was to move on, to find that, I love this concept of ikigai. If you haven't discovered ikigai yet, it's where you find imagine 4 circles overlapping between something the world needs, you know, something you can do, something you get paid for, but something you're good at. Because if you find out what you're good at and you do something good with it, then that's when you really, really find purpose and feel good about it being the right thing. Oh, and you can pay the rent.
What a fantastic way to finish there, Karen. I don't think we're going to be able to take any of those out, so I think you might get all 6 of them included. I mean, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for your time there, and all the very best with your time with Social Enterprise UK.
You're very welcome.